They used to have them in Sydney and Melbourne, everywhere, you know, these Battle of the Bands with the radio station, or Hoadley's Violet Crumble Bar. I used to have the Hoadley's Battle of the Bands.
Is that what you got if you won the Battle of the Bands?
Probably two. You get two of each in the band member, so just be pleased with that. But anyway, and most of these band competitions I really think are crap anyway, but so the Saints made it in, and the final was at Festival Hall, so me and some friends went down to watch these bands play, and it was hilarious. So you had and these were the days in Brisbane to play gigs. If you wanted to be a band that got gigs, you had to wear satin clothes, shorts and top, and play status quo songs. So there was about 2 bands came on that day doing Roll Over, Lay Down, you know, like one band after the other in their satin outfits, you know, so it was quite comical. And then the Saints hit the stage, and talk about a revolution. So they were dressed not like anybody else. They all had lit cigarettes, so there was 4 little red lights walking around on stage. And Chris's hair was like that, and he'd flick it back and it'd be back there in a flash. The whole set, and it was quite funny, and they were really good. They played Stranded and a couple of other songs, and I thought, fuck, these guys are good.
You might do language, this is a bit more sophisticated in Melbourne.
Yeah, I apologise, I'm a ruffian, so...
The elderly are here.
The elderly, oh God, I'm in trouble now. So anyway, that was probably a good snapshot of the Brisbane scene, and the Saints were great, and Stranded came out not too long after that. They recorded the single, and the rest is history, of course. So Brisbane musically was like that. So for us undesirables, we played halls. That hall on the right, that gig, that is called the Heaper Hall at West End in Brisbane, which is South Brisbane, if you know Brisbane, south of the river. In those days, that was an area you wouldn't walk around at night. You'll get attacked. You know, it was not a good area. That particular gig was one of the worst gigs I've ever played. People were jumping up behind the stage, pissing behind your ramps on stage. Riot.
People or men?
Men. Yes, men. So we packed up, and there was the band that played before us was a band called the Disposable Fits, and the singer was a heroin addict, surprise, surprise, and he got up and was yelling into the mics, going, just, you know, and so they're taking the mics away from him. So we were trying to play songs, we had no mics left, so we just, guys pissing behind the amps, people running all over the stage, no microphones, absolute chaos. We just packed up and got out of there. Surprisingly, the police didn't arrive that night.
Did the police often arrive at these gigs? Like, was that kind of standard procedure that they'd come and try and bust up the gig or whatever, stop you playing?
Yes.
Yeah, and were you scared then? Was it a scary thing?
Yes, it depends who you were. There were some people who would go like that to the police. I wasn't one of them, but they were pretty, you know, treat you like shit, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one gig I went to, was in a hall, and I think RAZAR were the top band and organised it. And so we're there with their friends, just sitting around the hall, watching the bands play, nothing too exciting. The cops walked in with the dogs, Alsatian dogs, shut the whole thing down, everybody out, and a friend of mine who was waiting for us to get out so we could drive him home. Cop said to him, "Move on." And he says, "I'm waiting for my friends." In the back of the van, trumped up charge, swore at the police. I won't swear, I won't say what the charge was. But yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah. So they get fined and you could get locked up, or you could get beaten up by the police, maybe?
All of the above, or one of the above.
Okay.
So yes, to the Watch House in Brisbane. So yeah, it was not a fun place. And that sort of led to a lot of people coming out of Brisbane in that area, that era, I should say, being pretty hard-nosed and not, you know, what's the word, had the commitment, because if you wanted to stay in doing this sort of music that we're doing, you had to, you know, really struggle to keep going at it. So,
and do you think it informed the character of the music? Like when you were talking about the Saints before, like that sort of kind of punk rock ethos, or that determination, the rebellion, the aggression in the music. Do you think that this political situation in Brisbane, that it influenced the music?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think so. And the Saints even had songs about that, you know, Brisbane. What's it?
Security.
City. Yeah. It did. It certainly did. And It was violent. I remember when I moved to Sydney in 1978, and
From where? Where?
from Brisbane.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was no gigs left to play, you know. And not only were the police violent, half the punks were violent. I mean, you get beaten up. So you know, it was much more violent than you know what you thought. And that place is the Curry House, and that's the X-Men playing at the Curry House. But anyway, there was no gigs left. Even if a pub gave us a chance, these violent punks would come in and smash the place up. So that was the end of that gig. You couldn't go back there. So this is what it was like. And when I got to Sydney, and I'm sure Sydney had its violent elements, it was much more fashion conscious than Brisbane. And you know, which was interesting to me. So I didn't see the violence in Sydney that I saw in Brisbane.
Well, I grew up in Melbourne, and
How was Melbourne?
Melbourne, well, we've always been very fashionable here, haven't we? So, yeah, black, and more black. I don't recall it being violent, though. It was certainly politically, it was. What was happening in Brisbane was totally unique in Australia in a way. In terms of that kind of repression
Well, the closest
and
thing,
fear.
exactly, the closest thing that I can put it to is communist Russia. You know, where they were trying to stamp you out. You know,
Yeah.
the police were over the top. You know, and it was really that sort of attitude. And yeah.
Yeah. So Melbourne, I think we were much freer here, and then Sydney was the same. Although when I grew up in Melbourne, I left Melbourne, went to Sydney, and to me Sydney was like just this kind of cosmopolitan mecca with so many people from other cities around Australia gravitated towards Sydney at that time.
I think that's true. When I went down to Sydney, I remember going out and going through all these pubs in Paddington and then into Oxford Street and French's and all these places, and there's bands on.
Yeah.
And they're all playing something interesting. Even in the pubs, there'd be a duo on acoustic guitar. They're not playing the top 40, they're playing something interesting. And it was like, wow, this is different.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. That's just more of the X-Men. Next slide, please.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So that place in West End on Boundary Street,
Yeah.
is it still there?
No, I don't think so. It's
What was it?
a Heaper Hall.
A Heaper Hall.
A-P-H-I-A, something
They
like
didn't
that.
replace it, or?
No, it's all modern buildings.
Oh, right.
So South Brisbane now, West End, South Brisbane is really, that's trendy now.
Right. Okay.
Because then it used to be where the down and out Aboriginals would hang out and all this
So
sort of
it's all
stuff.
like gentrified now and
Correct.
corporate.
Exactly right.
Musgrave Park
Yeah, Musgrave Park.
the strong
Yeah, exactly.
of the Indigenous. It's
Oh,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Musgrave Park. Okay.
I think that's still there, Bill. I think it's still there. So this next picture, I went to Sydney and I was actually playing jazz and learning jazz at Don Andrews Jazz School, if that means anything to anyone, and it probably doesn't. But that was 78, and then in 79, John Hoey and Mark Kingsmill and I got a basement. If you know Mark Kingsmill, he's a drummer, or was a drummer in the Hoodoo Gurus and lots of other bands. John Hoey, I mentioned before. So we moved into this basement under a shop in Oxford Street, Paddington, and it was a drop-in centre, so everyone used to come around. And Sydney, and I'm sure Melbourne, you'll have to tell me whether Melbourne was like this. Darlinghurst, Surrey Hills, Paddington, King's Cross was a real centre for the indie underground type music scene, and I was right in the middle of that. And so it was a drop-in centre. So John Hoey had joined the Thought Criminals. Mark Kingsmill was in the other side with Rob Younger and crew. So I was looking for a band. So Janine Hall shows up. Janine in the pink, there's pink and red on the bass. And Janine from Melbourne royalty had just left a band called the Young Charlatans. And I remember hearing about the Young Charlatans, and another friend of mine, Jeffrey Wagner, of course, was in the Young Charlatans, who gone down in history as probably the most famous band that we don't have a record from. So anyway, Janine and I said, oh, well, let's get a band together. Yeah, sure. So me thinking, and Sydney was deadly serious at that point. Everyone was very, serious about their music. And So, sorry, you'll have to tell me about Melbourne in a sec. So we just got this band together, and she wanted to do the opposite of what I thought, which was Gene Vincent and Elvis Presley and all this sort of stuff, and I'm thinking, my God. But what a turning point that was. You know, everybody loved us, and that band got me the gig in the Saints. So tell me, how was Melbourne in 1979?
Well, I was actually living in Sydney.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't really know what was going on. Bruce Butler might be able to answer.
Well, I found Melbourne quite different to what was going on in Sydney. Just in as much as Melbourne, the punk scene was, and I suppose myself as well, sort of, you know, middle class, private school students. It didn't have the violence of Brisbane, that's for sure. Also, where I found Sydney far more rock orientated, I found Melbourne in '79 far more experimental. And you mentioned people like Young Charlatans, definitely, but also Models and, you know, a lot of the other bands that were going on around that time. It was it was a big scene too, where there were so many venues, bands could play 5 nights a week just in and around Melbourne, and often did. Even touring bands. I mean, XTC were here in '79, and they played about 4 shows in Melbourne in 1 week, just in pubs. The Cure were here in 1980 and did the same. 5 nights they played up the road in Kew at the Prospect Hill, and then in South Yarra at Macy's, and then played at the Bombay Rock over in Brunswick, and the Crystal Ballroom in St Kilda, and they were able to play so often. It was,
Sonny Boys,
you know,
supported them in Sydney.
Yep.
You know, when their gigs there.
Yeah, so there was a lot going on. I just found it quite different because I did go up to Sydney quite a bit. But yeah, I found it a very different scene. Both were thriving, but in different ways.
I'd just like to talk a little bit more about Janine Hall, the bass player, because I played in a band with Janine as well.
That's right.
A band called Kings of the World in Sydney, and that was in the late 80s. And Janine was originally from New Zealand,
That's right.
and she lived other places. Was she in Brisbane?
She did Townsville too, didn't
Townsville, that's right, with Jim Dixon.
That's right.
That's where she met Jim Dixon. Janine Hall was a bass guitarist and a real trailblazer for women at that time, and still her impact, I think, resonates amongst the female musical community. She was one of the first female instrumentalists in Australia. And it was very unusual in those days for any women to be playing instruments, musical instruments, and especially in rock as well. So she had a very interesting history and played in some amazing bands, as you said, the Young Charlatans, the Saints,
Teddies.
The Teddies.
Well, the Teddies were more like a passing band. We weren't really serious. But yeah, Janine, I agree with everything you said. She was incredible in what she did.
Yeah.
And I should mention too, in Brisbane before I lived next door to Lindy Morrison, and from the Go-Betweens, the drummer.
Yeah.
And I used to get together with Lindy on a Sunday afternoon with a cheap flagon on the guitar.
As you do.
As you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'd play guitar, and Lindy plays drums, and I think there was someone on piano. We just sit there and play for hours, and while she was learning the drums. But again, you know, good on them, Lindy and Janine, and I enjoyed my time at Janine.
Yeah, she was great. But even just looking here, this Lipstick Killers special guest, XL Capri, Shy Imposters, Teddy's Passengers. Now, they all had women in those bands as well, didn't they?
Shy Imposters was Penny, the singer.
Yeah.
Not Penny's last name.
Not Penny Ward.
No, it is Penny
Not
Ward.
Penny Ikinger. Was it Penny Ward?
I think you're right.
Yeah. Like, actually, that's quite extraordinary looking at that, because there were so few women playing at that time.
And for those, XL Capri was Joanna Piggott, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And who I did meet Joanna, and the passengers was Angie Pepper.
Angie Pepper on vocals, who ended up marrying Dennis Tech.
That's right.
Yeah. And did Jim Dixon play bass in the Passengers? I think so. I think he did.
He was, yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did. And these were bands that I used to see, and you would probably see too, all the time. Like the Civic pub was just a pub in the city. We'd have
I loved the Civic.
band. Well, you played there in the Wet Taxis, didn't you?
I can't remember. Probably.
I'm sure you played there.
Yeah.
I used to, by the way, Penny was in the Wet Taxis in Sydney, which we'll get to a bit soon, but I used to see Penny play in the Wet Taxis and Carroll Park, was it Carroll Park, I believe?
Carroll Park Hotel, I
Yeah.
believe, yeah.
So the Civic was a great gig. The Lipstick Killers were really good. But yeah, that's a very good observation that women were making their presence felt in that scene in those days. Which I think has gone on. There's a lot of, it's pretty normal now to have women in bands, I think.
It's still, it's still,
Still not there.
well, no, there's women playing, but I think there's, it's still a smaller percentage of musicians are female than male. And I think there's a difference too between, there's women who play instruments and there's women who sing, and then there's women who do both. So, and I think women have found it easier to be accepted in bands as singers than as instrumentalists.
Yeah, interesting. I know Janine faced a fair amount of struggle with that, I think, with people. But perhaps move on the next slide, please, because, yep, bring it up. And the next band I was in, next one please Joe, was the Saints. So unbeknownst to me at this time, 79, Janine and Chris Bailey had started going out together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know. Why'd you tell me? Anyway, and I remember playing a gig, and Bailey was in the audience, and I didn't even know until the end of the show that he was there. She introduced me to him. It's like, oh, it's Chris Bailey. And of course the Saints at that point were huge. You know, just released all those great albums, come back from England. And of course the Saints we thought were no more too, by the way.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I remember going to a party with him in Bondi Junction, getting drunk out of my head, and him and I dancing on the dance floor, and he says to me, do you want to join the Saints? So it was like, my God. Well, what do you
It's
say?
your lucky day.
Well, what do you say to that invitation?
Mm.
You know, where do I start? We started out doing a single show at the Stage Door Tavern towards the end of 79, which then led to the Paralytic Tonight, Dublin Tomorrow tour. And then Janine, of course she was going out with Chris, I guess, but Janine ended up in the Saints too, and you see Janine there. So Janine and I sort of went from the Teddies to the Saints, which is ironic, totally ironic, if you think about the Sydney scene at the time. I do remember one thing about the Teddies though, which was funny, because we were a fun band, and we could play drunk, because we actually practiced seriously in a garage in Woolloomooloo, and we could drink and play, and a lot of the serious bands had limits on no drugs and alcohol at practice, and they get to a gig, and what do you do between sound check and playing time? You have a drink, and then when they got up to play, they couldn't play so well. So, but it wasn't a problem for us. But you had people like Rob Younger putting 2 jugs of beer on the stage for us. You had people like Chris Bailey loving us. I mean, this is totally twisted my head. But anyway, we went from being what I thought was just a fun band to being, you know, got us the gig in the Saints. So what can you say?
And what about that Stuart Coote there?
Oh, Stuart.
Yeah, was he the one that just released a book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the book?
The latest one's about King's Cross.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
King's Cross Mafia. But, so he's been around all that time.
Yes,
doing
he's
that.
been around as long as we have.
Like doing journalism and
Yeah.
like, wow, that's amazing. Really? I didn't know. Sorry.
That's okay.
Next.
So,
He wrote that book about roadies, which he said was his bestseller.
Oh, right.
And he wrote book on Gudinski, which Gudinski hated.
The Godfather.
Yeah, The Godfather.
Yeah, I think there's Stuart, Mark Mordew.
Yeah, Mark.
There's a couple of other journalists. Is it Murray Engelhard was he there? I think they were around there,
Yeah,
weren't
they
they?
were. Yeah.
And they're still going. So
Now,
anyway, yeah. Sorry,
Do you know who the photographer was who took that photo?
that's Judy Drancy.
It's a great photo. I love it.
That
Who took that?
Judy Dransfield, now
Oh,
Judy Cooper.
right.
So
Oh, really?
Ed Kuepper's wife.
I love her photography.
yeah, she's excellent and she's a great artist too. And Judy was one of my, and I consider one of my oldest friends. And we'll get to Ed in a minute, but again, it was the connection through Judy that got me that one. But yeah, Judy takes brilliant pictures and her artwork's fabulous, you know. She did so many Laughing Clowns covers and lovely person if you ever met Jude, she's fabulous. And so that became the cover of Paralytic Tonight, Dublin Tomorrow record. I had to pick Barrington up on the plane from England at like 6 in the morning. Then we drove down to the Rocks, went to the Hero of Waterloo, that's the Hero of Waterloo for those that know Sydney, and having a beer at 8 in the morning. That's why we all look so excited. And you know, that became the photo. And Barrington's off the plane, he's on the left with the sunnies. And that was the band.
You couldn't ask for a better photo for a cover, eh?
I reckon that's one of the best photos I've ever seen of a band. And the bit on the right I thought I'd throw in there, this is when we
Cool too.
came to Melbourne, we stayed at Macy's and Track. And I remember Ivan and I were sharing the same room and we walked in, it was 2 single beds and he put his bag down on his bed and the leg went and broke. So on to the next room. So
Paralytic tomorrow.
the joys of a rock and roller. So, but anyway, that's just a bit of history. So
who are the Kevins?
I don't know, like a local
Who
band.
cares? Move on.
Well, when you're touring, and I'm sure Penny will vouch for this, but get your point of view, is half the time you never see the support bands. Because you're too busy and you're away and you come back and then after a while you get a bit jaded by it, don't really want to... You might see the last few songs, but that's about it. Who are the Kevins? I don't really know. God bless their hearts. But anyway, that was next, please. And probably move through that. That's just a few more. And a few more. And a few more. So you can see we're all having a good time. That's Chris and Janine, obviously. And that photo was taken in the dungeon of the Leichhardt Hotel in Leichhardt, Sydney. And you go down this set of stairs. And I thought that was a great photo of them. And what else have we got? Yeah, Saints. Anyway, just a few things I thought I'd throw up. But yeah, keep going. Sorry, we've talked all these through. Next one. The New Christ. So I left the Saints in the middle of 1980 and living in Darlinghurst, and Rob Younger from Radio Birdman fame was one of my friends, and he'd been in the other side and they'd split up. So Rob and I used to get together, play records, eat food, drink beer, talk shit, as you do. And he said, well, him or I, whichever one it was, says, let's get a band together. And he says, I've got Clyde Bramley as bass player, and I said, I've got John Harvey, a keyboard player. And we struggle with a drummer, and even though it says Ken Doyle, I'll explain that in a minute, we had this other drummer who didn't quite work out for us, and so that version of the band wasn't called The New Christ. We didn't even have a name. So we practiced, we worked out a set, Rob and I wrote some songs, and the drummer split, and then Rob just said, I've had enough of this. So I said, well, I've got enough money. We know Roger Grierson, if those who know Roger. Let's record the 2 songs we've got and put them out. And Rob agreed. And so the name The New Christ came out after we recorded. The songs are in the bag, and then Rob calls it The New Christ. So.
Well, if you'd been in Brisbane, you might have ended up in jail with a name like The New Christ.
I would have been burnt at the stake in King George Square. And and that's just a photo of the new, and that's the band. And Rob was trying to call himself Rowdy Yates and trying to hide it as Rob Younger, which was about as successful as, I don't know, I can't think of a good cliche. It didn't work at all. But anyway, and that was the band. Anyway, that, of course, we never played live. That's one of the bands that never played live, because then they got rung up. Rob got rung up and asked to do the Iggy Pop tour about a year later. No, whatever, and the rest is history. They're still playing, and they're playing here next weekend. And the next slide, please.
I think the New Christ are one of my favourite bands ever. Whatever lineup, so many great lineups of the New Christ.
They did. I saw them recently and caught up with them a couple of times in the last couple of years, and they've been really good. Oh, this was the phase that we all went through back in those days. Everybody put out a cassette. I don't know whether you went through that.
Of course.
We all did. That was my cassette thing, and I can't listen to it now. I find this stuff horrible. But anyway, we all had to go. Next, please. Yeah, that's the band I tried to get together around that time, which didn't really happen. So that was a bit of a fail thing. But the trade union club was good. Next one, please. And that's. For those that don't know, they had this big festival called Sedition. Do you remember?
Sedition, yep.
Yeah. We played there, and that was a good gig. It was a really good festival.
Do you remember what year that was?
I think it was 1983.
83, probably, yeah. See, such a great lineup.
It is.
Lineups, plural.
And we were there on the Friday, and the Celebrate Rifles were there that night, and they were really good. And the Scientists, and Wet Taxis.
Wet Taxis.
As I said, Wendy and
Penny.
Penny and I have shared a lot of history here. It's great.
I played guitar in Wet Taxis.
How important was the 3 stories of the trade union club?
Very.
Every story was different. Different vibe. So, do you remember who would play on the first floor?
Yeah, the first floor was more like your average rhythm and blues or ordinary band, and that's the floor that had the poker machines. So they still had music on, but that was more like cover bands.
Yeah. And then there was the second floor, and then there was a third floor. Do you remember?
I played on the second and the third floor in different ways, but the second floor was sort of an overflow from the third floor.
Third floor. The second floor, I think Tillett did a big stint on the second floor, but Wet Taxis we would play on the third floor a lot, supporting various bands, some like all playing on the same bills with Celebrate Rifles and Die Pretty and Eastern Dark and Scientists. But we also, Wet Taxis, supported Nico on the third floor of the Sydney Trade Union Club. I loved the Sydney Trade Union Club. It was one of my favourite places to play. But if you stayed there late enough after you'd played and you loitered around the poker machines on the first floor, you could find a lot of money on the ground, because in those days before cards, when people had that thing called cash, people would be just pulling out their dollar bills or their 20-cent piece, whatever, and funneling it into the machines. And I think one night I found about $400 on the ground at the first floor, which is certainly more than the band would have got paid.
You did extremely well.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question? Like, is it Scientists like Kim Salmon Scientists? Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, the bands, and I would just back what Penny says, the amount of bands I used to see at the trade union. I used to live close and walk, so every Friday night you walk down the trade union. The Moodists, the Scientists I used to see regularly, X.
Even the cockroaches.
Oh my God, don't mention the cockroaches. Oh no, not the cockroaches, yes the cockroaches. And on and on and on. I mean, most bands you can think of that became famous played at the trade. And it was really interesting, the big bands at the time, and the trade was sort of the epicenter of the indie scene. So if you put Jimmy Barnes on or Cole Chisel on there, they'd probably die. No one would go. but if you put on like the Wet Taxis, I mean, and I'd have to say Penny was also a great inspiration for women doing their things in bands, and went on. And the Wet Taxis, I saw the Wet Taxis headlining gigs and big band with the brass, and so these guys went on to do great things as well, you know. But it was really the scientists used to be like, when I saw them, they would be on middle of the bill, you know, doing their stuff. And it's, you know, all these legendary bands, sort of a lot of them started there. Next slide, please. And please ask questions as we go. This is interesting too. This is serendipity. So I moved out of Darlinghurst to go to Newtown. I was getting married and buying a house and all these things you're supposed to do. And bought a house that backed onto St. Peter's railway line, or the railway station. So the house shook with the trains, you know, the old... And I got asked to join Coupe de Ville, and Coupe de Ville were just the pub band at the Leichhardt pub. We were their house band, play a Friday or Saturday night if no one else is on. And the singer there you'll see on the left photo with the mic is Brett Stevenson. For those, I don't know anyone knows Brett, but
Yeah, I know Brett.
he was the manager of the pub. But as a singer, couldn't sing, couldn't time, but he looked good.
Very important.
Very important. So that was Brett. But I mean, Brett had his, you know, he had his positives for sure. And I like Brett. He was fun to be with.
His knee drops.
Oh, the knee drops. That was the funny story with. He used to do the knee drops. You know what a knee drop is? And he did them. He used to get drunk and do the knee drops. And I remember us playing the next week, and he's sitting on a stool, you know, like this. He couldn't walk.
Is he living in South America now?
Yes.
Maybe he's on the run.
Yeah.
He needs the cocaine for his knees.
So the guy on the sax is a guy called Ed Kuepper, who was a brilliant jazz sax player who we came across, and the bass player was Phil Somerville, who was in the Hitman and other bands. So the band, and the drummer's Joey Breen, and me at the right hand, and Barbara on piano. So we're actually a pretty decent playing band. The thing with the Coupes was they never practiced, which to me was perfect. And we just did covers, you know, rhythm and blues or rock and roll or Gene Vincent again, all that sort of stuff. And never practiced perfect, so just show up and play. You know what the songs are, you learn them at home and off you go. And if you go to the next slide, please. I had people saying to me in Darlinghurst when I said I'm going to join the Coupe de Villes, you shouldn't do that. You know, that's going down, you've been in these big bands, you're going sliding down the slippery slope on the other side. So, yeah, rightio. Okay, so I joined the Coupes because it was easy, and I wasn't getting any other offers, by the way. And there's Brett you'll see on the right with Bo Diddley. And for those that know Bo Diddley's history, he used to come to Australia pretty regularly, I think, and had pick-up bands, whether he picked them up or his management. Some were good, some were bad. In this particular year, he had a bad band. You know, not in tune with him or in sympathy with his music or whatever. So Brett met him at some gig and said, well, how about, and talked to his manager, said, the deal is I'll put you on at the Leichhardt pub, providing Coupe de Ville as the backing band. And during the week, you know, and Bo agreed. And he could only play early because he had to play another gig that night. So he showed up, and the deal was, you know, we got half an hour with Bo beforehand, and we were all nervous. So the great Bo Diddley, you know, with us, shit, you know. So anyway, Bo shows up 5 minutes before he goes on. Not half an hour, five minutes. Gave us only a few instructions. No set list. And said, right, on we go. Next slide. So that's the gig. That's the first gig we ever played with him, and I'm standing to the right of Bo. So he just goes on, and we're all sitting there, and he told the only music instruction was to the drummer when he does his famous Bo Diddley beat song, dum ba dum ba dum bum bum, play straight beat. That's what Bo wanted. Do not play that bump the toms. Bo's story was when he recorded that in the 50s, the amplifier's tremolo, he could get slowed down enough to play with the toms or whatever it was, so they were doing it together. And he says, you can't do that anymore, so don't bother. So he had to do it. So Bo can play drums. I actually saw him play drums. He took over the drums once he played. I played together with Bo for 5 times. Yeah, he's expletive, damn good drummer. And anyway, so that's the gig. And on the top right photo, you'll see I'm standing next to Bo, and Bo just starts playing, and I'd work out what keys he's playing the song in. You know, like it's a song that you would know the chords of. You know, anyone could have played them, but okay, what keys are you? You know, and then I'd yell it out to the rest of the band, and off we'd go. And we were a pretty good band, and we were playing that stuff really well, and Bo really enjoyed it and got off on it and hung around and played some great stuff. So we ended up doing another 4 gigs with Bo Diddley after that. So it was really an honour. And Bo was great, you know, he's a nice guy. He's the man and one of the real true, originators of the whole thing. And I just thought I'd throw that up. We also, as Coupe de Ville, played with the Trogs. That's the original Trogs, playing in the Leichhardt pub of all places. That's the cellar room down the bottom, where you walk down the stairs and we're in the cellar. And I'm talking to them all, and we all are. And there's Reg Presley, second from the right. The guitarist, I forgot his name, the guy standing up. He was, bending my ear. But anyway, they were easy enough guys to talk to, so. Then came Ed. So basically, I left Coupe de Ville, I tried my own band, that didn't work, I gave up, and I was studying, so I just basically dropped out of the music scene. I think I used to go and see you guys with Lewis and Damo, but I wasn't really playing in a band. And then one night in 1985, I got a call, or one afternoon, a call from Judy Dransfield, Judy Kuepper. The Laughing Clowns had finished and invited me to go for dinner with her and Ed, and my wife, of course. So off he went, and Ed and I, got on fine, and that led to me, he asked me to do some demos for him, because I had a little Porter Studio thing that I was doing demos of songs, and he liked that. So I demoed all these songs for him, and then he said, well, let's go into the studio and do them, and that turned into Electrical Storm.
And Nick Fisher, who played drums in Wet Taxis, he ended up playing on that album.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick was a great drummer, I thought.
Yeah.
And that's in Melbourne. The photograph of me and Ed is in Richmond, actually. We played in the Bongo Starkey's Club, is all I can remember.
Oh, that's Collingwood.
I'm going to say that was the Jump Club.
Was it?
Jump
Yeah,
Club.
that was in Collingwood.
Collingwood.
Smith Street, yeah.
Okay, Smith Street, yes, it was. But anyway, that was a really good gig, and I toured with Ed. So we did the album then with Nick from the Wet Taxis. We then and I remember I played with Ed when the Wet Taxis were on in Sydney at the Graphic Arts, I think.
Okay.
And so you were there playing Penny.
Yeah.
So this is the period where Penny and I paths were crossing quite a lot.
Yeah. And Ed Kuepper used to live very close. I was sharing a house with Lewis Tillett, who was the singer in Wet Taxis, also a solo artist and a multi-instrumentalist. Lewis and I shared a house in Newtown, and Ed lived just around the corner, and he'd come round to our place quite a bit and wolf down the Scotch with Lewis.
I remember going to your place.
Yeah.
I used to drop by, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you and Ed did some demos in our shed at the back of our place in Newtown.
I'm not sure.
But yeah, I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the Wet Taxis were, and, Penny, Lewis and Ed, we were the Newtown scene. So, when I said before, when I moved out from Surrey Hills, Darlinghurst to Newtown,
Yeah.
it was like going to Mars. All the people in Surrey Hills where the scene was sort of excommunicated you, and they wouldn't come visit you, it was too far. So we had the Newtown scene, which was like Penny, Lewis, Ed, I guess me. There's others too, I can't think of off the top of my head, but there was a whole scene out there that started to develop. And
What street did you live in then?
In Baltic Street.
Oh, okay. Was
Yeah.
that near Enmore Theatre? Or?
Yes, it was near Enmore Theatre. Yeah.
Next slide, please. And then that led to... So I did the Ed Kuepper stuff, which was great. That album has gone down in history, blah, 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 blah. We can talk about... Sorry? it was fun recording it because I could operate the whole studio because I had that technical background, and the guy who ran the studio used to be in the Purple Hearts. Remember the band, the Purple Hearts?
Yeah. So did you also record Wet Taxis? Did you record Wet
No,
Taxis?
no. I dropped into the studio when the Wet Taxis were doing some stuff. I mean, but I didn't. I was
Is
just.
the studio
observer.
still there?
That was Paradise Studio, which
Paradise Studios.
I don't know whether it's still there.
And that was in Newtown, was it? Paradise Studios?
No, Woolloomooloo. Was it
Waterloo.
Somewhere around
Yeah, the studio that we used for Ed's record was an old Neve console, for that
Oh,
means anything,
beautiful.
in Annandale. And I think AC/DC had recorded there or something, and it had, the tape machine wasn't so good, and Dave, the engineer, once he knew I could run it all, he was gone out buying dope, so he just sat there, smoked dope. So Ed and I basically, and we had also Nick coming in, and Lewis played on it. So it was Ed and I doing the whole thing together, and it was a good experience. I like those consoles.
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of recording at a studio here in Melbourne, the Hot House in St Kilda. He uses a Neve console.
Yeah. Neve's really good, but and that led to when we were playing in Melbourne, we actually were supporting the Triffids. And Julian, who was here earlier, these photos of me and Ed, and the photo of David was taken by Julian. And so we were playing.
Julian Wu.
Yeah. And so I met David McComb. The Electrical Storm had just come out, and my whole career changed from being on stage to being in the studio in the late 90s, or the late 80s. And I was sitting there at the end after our sound check and all that, and this guy heard this voice from behind me, said, "Can I use your amp?" "Yeah, sure, go for it." And it's Dave McComb. So, and I just got friends with the Triffids, and David came up to me at one point and said, "Would you like to produce an album for us? We're going to go out in the middle of nowhere, a sheep shed outside Perth, and record all these songs," which was in the Pines. I said, "Sure." So they did that. I didn't go there, and then they sent me the 8-track tapes. This is all done on Tascam 8-track, and again, if you know the Triffids' history, this album and Calendar, the one that followed, are sort of linked, tied at the hip nearly. In that, this was, and I remixed it. It's the only album I mixed twice. I mixed it in 1986 and again in 2005 for the digital release, and did it all again. There's a story to that, but one by one, as I was mixing these songs and sending them to London, so David McComb and I would swap letters. I've still got one of the letters. We're swapping the letters, and one by one, all of the songs are disappearing out of the. I'm getting left of the. So In the Pines got left with not all the great songs went on Calendar, put it like that, or the bigger songs, and I wouldn't have done it any different either. But so when we did it in 2005, basically Graham Lee tracked me down, and I didn't have the master tapes because I'd sent that to London. But I had the 8-track tapes, so we transferred that onto digital, and I remixed it, and I said, let's put together In the Pines how it was originally intended, with the songs that were on Calendar done on In the Pines, which we did. And one thing that Graham Lee has said to me, which I found interesting, is that David McComb, in terms of singing, In the Pines, to him is the best way to hear Dave sing, because he didn't have to double track, he didn't have the studio pressures, he could just sing. So that was interesting. I didn't appreciate that until then. And one last thing on David McComb before I leave it there. And I was talking to Julian Wu tonight. In the last year, I was asked graciously by Julian and Graham and Robert McComb to mix David McComb's last recordings he did before he died. Very special honour, and so I did that for them, and I believe that's coming out soon. So I've had some delays in getting it out, but hopefully when that comes out, and I recommend you have a listen for those who are Triffids fans. You'll get a kick out of it. And now we come to after that.
One of my favourite albums ever.
An album that Penny knows all about, because Penny was a part of this. So I then got approached by Lewis. So I turned into the studio guy. Wanted to do a record, and that had the Wet Taxis and Paris Green, which is a band he had on the side, which was a good band. And I said sure. So we hired a studio. We went in, and the band was Louis Burdett.
Yep, on drums.
Penny, my esteemed colleague Penny, Lewis of course, Charlie Allen,
On guitar.
and what's the bass player?
Lenny Bastians.
Lenny Bastians, and other people played on it as well. I played bass on one track, but basically there was, and the singers Mary
Ellen Stringer.
Yeah.
Who ended up, I'm just thinking the chronology. After this, we played, Mary Ellen sang in the band Kings of the World that I told you about, we talked about before, that Janine Hall played bass in Kings of the World as well.
So that to me was a good experience. So we had the studio for a couple of weeks, and I think, as we were talking about before, and Penny raised us about recording back then to recording now. You had to get it down then and there. You know, you can come back and do an overdub if you want. Doing drop-ins was not so easy, but we did it. But it was a very different experience. So you basically had to capture the performance at the time, and then yes, you could add to it, but the bass performance had to be there. And I think what was captured on that album was pretty great stuff, really, for the time. And everyone's playing was really good, and it was a good experience, and the album came out well. You know, here it is.
Great artwork too.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, yes, it's a tarot card. I think Alistair Crowley.
Right.
Yeah. But Lewis was quite an extraordinary musician. His technical abilities, creative abilities, but also I think his sound was quite unique at that time, especially in Sydney when we're talking about the bands that we were playing in. The Sydney rock sound was very much influenced, I think, by Radio Birdman and that lineage of music, and Lewis didn't really fit into that mould. So he had a very unique style that was a mix of rock and blues and jazz, and he loved soul music, he loved classical music. He had very broad taste in different styles of music.
Yeah, and I think he was one of the most talented people that I've worked with, Lewis. He could sit at a piano and play anything and just sing it, and it was just natural. I think he could have been one of Australia's best artists of that style, you know.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
You know, in those days they used to talk about Dutch Tillers and all these people who never turned me on, but Lewis, to me, for my 20 cents worth, was better than all of them. He was just so natural.
Yeah.
And it just flowed out of him. It was just effortless, it felt like.
Yeah, and he went on to release albums through labels in Germany, Normal Records, and Hitchhike Records in Greece. Yeah.
So that was a great, another great record. Next slide, please. It's a weak world. So the 80s, this part of the 80s was quite big for me. It was one sort of grand thing after another, and again, all from a studio point of view. I first met Damien Lovelock in about 1980, I think. I just left the Saints. And these were the days where he put up we put up an ad in the music shop, guitarist looking for this or singer looking for that. And I think that's how I rang him up, and he came round to my place in Darlinghurst. And, Damien, and you probably know this, he was an ex-heroin addict. He just finished We Help Ourselves. And he was straight, and he was full of life, and he was so happy. Sorry.
He was on the hammer.
He was. In fact,
He was off the hammer by then, wasn't he?
he was off then. He
Yeah.
was off. He was an ex-heroin addict, so he'd clean himself up, he'd come back. there's so many stories I can tell you about Damo and all that, but we haven't got time for all of them. But so he was clean when I met him, and he was just so full of energy, he had a new lease of life. And you know, and for those, the story was he woke up in King's Cross and his flatmate was dead. So it was either he's next or get straight or you're gone. So that's what happened. And he got straight anyway. And that started a friendship. I didn't particularly want to be in a band with him. I just left a band, so I'd had enough of that. But we became fast friends, and I was with him when he joined the Rifles and tried out for them because he asked me to help him try out for bands. And we just became great friends, and I'd see him a lot, and you know, I used to hear about the Celebrate Rifles and go to all the Rifles gigs, blah blah blah. And when it got to recording this album, he said he wanted me to produce it because he wanted to do the songs the way he wanted to do them rather than the Celebrate Rifles sort of thrash rock sort of stuff. And the thing that's interesting about this album is he pulled this band together, which was half of the Church. The Church had just recorded Starfish in Los Angeles. Under the Milky Way hadn't come out. They'd finished it and they were just sort of sitting back here twiddling their thumbs. So he got Peter Coppers on guitar and Richard Plug on drums. He got Rick Grossman on bass. Rick had just left the Divinyls, again because of drug problems. But Rick chose to leave, and for those that know him, Rick's a lovely guy, and he's been straight for a long, long time. I don't know whether you come across Rick, Deb?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, Rick's a lovely guy. So he had a fantastic band, and Joe on guitar, and I ended up playing on most of it anyway. And we did the record in free groups, and this is in the studio that I did Lewis's record with Penny in Tempe, and the guys, and this is the fellow I was mentioning to Belle and I were talking earlier. It's the best studio that I worked in because it had a AMEC Angela console, which was Neve designed, so it had that sound. He had great monitor speakers, he had grand piano, he had all his tuned drums, everything all set up. And it was Roy Cooper was the guy, and he also was a muso that played around, so he understood, you know. He wasn't just a straight engineer, and he put a microphone in front of the ramp and said, "What do you want? You know, you tell me what you want and I'll do it." And great guy to work with. And I ended up running his whole studio too, because I'd learned it all, and Roy was a great guy. But anyway, so that was a really fun record to do when we did it in 3 days, 3 separate 12-hour days, and just did all of the tracks and all of the overdubs, and then Damo and I mixed it in 12 hours. And in those days, there's no second chance, you know, like you mix it and that's it. And that to me was a great album to do. We'll move on, and then this I just thought I'd throw that. This is funny, so I then ended up playing with Damo's Wig World bands, supporting Ed Kuepper. Bit of history, but anyway, bit of fun. Next one, please. I'll zip through the next lot. I tried this, then I moved to Brisbane in the 90s, tried this band, it didn't work, so move on please. And then I had basically a break for about, I was out of the music scene for about 25 years until I moved north of Canberra and set up a studio and started to, you can go, next one Joe. And this got me back into recording bands, like these are all local bands doing different things from rockabilly to country to French gypsy blues to whatever. Next, Joe. And then this young band showed up and said to me, just leave it there, Joe. Who's this Cub Calloway guy? Because I'd stopped using that 20 years before that. And that was, you can thank Chris Bailey for that. He's the one that started that whole thing. And
How did he start it?
well, he started calling me Cab.
Right.
Of Cub Calloway.
Oh, right.
The original. I even have APRA send me a message one day saying, "Are you the Cub Calloway?" You know.
You should have said yes.
Yes.
I didn't want to end up in court, but I could have said yes.
So that was Chris Bailey's nickname for you?
For me, yeah.
Oh my God. Cool.
And then it got turned into Cub, you know. Hi. And so these young guys came in that I was recording and saying, "Is that you?" And I'm saying, "Oh yeah, well you should use that again." And it's like, So anyway, I did. So I started recording and writing and recording again, and I then had to sing, you know, because I had stopped singing and gave it up. I'm not the world's best singer, but you know, it's a period where I had to just start doing it again. So you'll see there on that particular record, I had Julie Mostyn and Warwick Gilbert, who are now husband and wife, playing on it.
Julie Mostyn had played in
Flaming Hands.
Flaming Hands, and Warwick had played in Radio Brisbane.
Yeah, and Hitman, and a bunch of other bands. And they're good friends of mine, and they're great. Next, please, Joe. And so I just started churning out a few records. That's a gig we did, and you can see Julie play with us down the bottom. Next one, please, Joe. So I'll go through these, and then I recorded this album. That's the Fall of the Empire album, a song I played earlier. And I had in the middle there, I found, just leave that there for a second, I found Richard Plug in Canberra of all places. So that's John Hoey and me and Richard. So Richard was a drummer in the church who left the church towards the end of the 80s, I think. And Richard was a guy who had, I think, some mental problems and drug problems or whatever, and most people thought he disappeared. I thought he disappeared. I couldn't find him, and a band came in to my place one day to record, and they mentioned his name. I thought, what? I tracked him down. Here he was in Canberra with 5 kids as a gardener.
Oh.
That'll do it.
Exactly. So I said, and we started playing and recording, and Richard's still a good friend. I saw him in April down in Canberra, and he's doing well. He's come back. So next slide, please.
So there is a music scene in Canberra?
There is, but never got me excited, put it like that. I never felt part of it, but there is a scene. This is recording this album again. And the only reason I show that photo is you can see at the bottom right, we had a bass fuzz solo using a spanner as a slide. Sounds fantastic.
That's a great idea.
And that's recording that album, and that was in a studio in Sydney. And next slide, please. And that was again around that era, and I started playing with people that would go on, like Phil Hall on bass in the top right, who I still play with. On the top left, you'll see that's me and Richard Plug when he was in the Sunny.
Richard Bergman.
Bergman, sorry, in the Sunny Boys, and that was at their day on the Green in Melbourne. I came down and caught up with Richard, and so the top 2 guys I'm playing with in the Hovering Spooks now. Next slide, please. And so this is sort of more recent times. This is about the time I met Alani and Bruce. I got asked to do a one-off gig with the Flaming Hands in Sydney at the Paddington RSL, and that was really good. And that's a photo of that gig.
What year was that?
2019. So, and the thing about that gig, I stayed at Hoey's place in Sydney for a week in Darlinghurst, and I was going to visit Damien Lovelock, you know, because he was sick, dying actually. And on the morning I was going to drive over to see him, he rang me up and said, said me, I can't meet. Okay. Then he passed away. So the next slide, please. And Damo the musical, which Alani knows about. This was only about a month later. We ended up doing the next slide, please. And that's the Wigwell band at the Enmore Theatre for that particular gig. That's drummer is Paul Larson. Oh, sorry. Just stop it there. Rick Grossman, Amanda Easton on vocals. That's Patrick in the middle there on acoustic is one Damo's oldest friend at the time, and he was actually ill, dying of cancer. Paul on drums, and we had Rex go on guitar, and Rex was one of the most top Australian guitarists around. It was a good gig, and then of course the Rifles came on and played their set, which was great. So it was an honour to do that. And the shirt I'm wearing, the striped shirt, which some people have accused me of wearing my pyjamas, that's actually a shirt I got. That's a Damo shirt that Patrick, and he's got a Damo shirt on. So when I went and saw Patrick to lead up to this gig, he gave me some elements of clothes that Damo had. So that I've still got the shirt. That's a Damo shirt. Next slide.
So Rick Grossman's was in the Diviners?
Yeah.
And Hoodoo Gurus. Yeah.
Yeah, and just after we did the Damo record with him in 87, 88, he joined the Gurus. and he's been with them ever since.
And Paul, there was a photo of Paul Larson too, the drummer,
Yeah.
who played in the Celebrate Rifles and is playing in the New Christ now.
Yep.
And did he do some stuff with Ed as well? Ed
Yes, the
Kuepper?
Aints.
The Aints, that's right, yeah.
So I guess the important point here is, besides all that old ancient history stuff which I rarely talk about, you know, it's good to know that all of these people, most of them are still doing something now. We're still kicking on. And you'll see there, that's at the same gig. So that's me playing with the Rifles, with Kent, with his beautiful coloured trousers on, and of course Jello Biafra, who was really good that night, I thought, Jello.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Next slide.
Well, Kent's always been a snappy dresser, hasn't he?
I've got to tell you a funny story about Kent. Yeah, I mean, the celibate Rifles break lots of rules. And snappy dresser is sort of, you know, code for he just wears whatever he wants to wear, and who cares. Well, they played a gig in Brisbane, and this is when I was living up in Brisbane and I wasn't playing, and, you know, family business, all that stuff. And I'd dropped out of the music scene for about 25 years. And I got invited along, of course, to go see the Rifles. And so I'm dressed like brown shorts and this blue shirt with lapels, which I never really wear. I look like a courier driver, you know, the sign here and issue parcel, I'm out the door. In shorts, you know, I felt like a dag, and I look like a dag. And the Rifles played a packed gig in this venue in Brisbane, and everyone, more, and they come off stage, and Ken hands me the guitar and says, "You do the encore." All right, so I walked out, and I think we did Rock and Roll or something, the Velvet Underground or whatever. It was a song I knew. And you should have seen the front row crowd. They were like shocked. Who's this guy, you know? It was quite funny, but that's the Rifles. They always had this crazy sense of humour. That's a band I was in called Stereo Bus for the last couple of years, which is my cousin's band, and I've left them now, but that was something I did more recently. You can see we're all sort of getting on. Next slide, please. That's us again, playing at a place called the Lincoln Pin at Woy of all
Well, I
places.
love the Lincoln Pin.
Did you play there, Penny?
Yeah, it's great.
The people that run it are great, and it's a great little venue and not too far north of Sydney, about an hour. And this is my main band at the moment, the Hovering Spooks, which is Paul Larson on the left, Phil Hall, Richard Bergman and me. And we put out some songs. We just recorded a whole bunch of stuff, and we want to put out some more. And part of my reason to come down here was to check out venues to see whether we could play in Melbourne. That's just playing in Sydney. We played, the bottom right is also playing in Melbourne, Maitland. That's a place, Newcastle, Maitland is a place you could think about, because
I haven't played there.
it's a good scene. People will go. People go along. So that's sort of us playing around. And Belle, hold the slide there. Belle Phoenix, take a bow. So Jeffrey, on the bottom right in the middle is Jeffrey Wagoner, an old friend of mine, and Jeffrey went to Europe last year, Berlin or whatever it was, and met Belle.
Target.
Sorry?
I was his target.
And he met Belle, and he came back and he told me about this great singer he met called Belle, you know, and Belle's coming back to Australia, so Belle did come back to Australia, and Belle and Jeffrey were getting together in January earlier this year, right? So I said, okay, well, he wasn't sure about stuff, and I have still had enough recording gear from my marriage. I got some studio equipment, and my music stuff, so I was okay. So I came over, in the bottom right pictures there, you'll see Belle and Jeffrey, and looks chaotic, but that's the way it was. And Belle and Jeffrey recorded
Demolition.
Yeah, the Demolition, which turned into without
which was
any.
meant to be a demo.
Yeah.
Listen, but it's not really a demo.
Yeah.
It took me a while to sort of accept it. I think it took a few months.
Yeah.
And then it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. I just was like, shit, that's not a demo. I need to release it. But I released it as a demo. But it's sort of been a process with that one.
Oh, for sure. I think, for what it was, and just a demo, and we hadn't really played together, and it came out pretty good. And it has the thing that I think you're talking about that I like about it, it's got an atmosphere. It creates an atmosphere that for that particular time. It's pretty good. And
I think it was the perfect capture at the moment.
Exactly. And that was great, we did that, and it was good to do again. So I think that's nearly the end of it. Joe, is there anything else? Oh.
The new album.
Oh. What, for you?
Yours.
Mine? No, I haven't got a new album, but I have started up the Revolutionaires again with Jeffrey, me, John Harvey, and all the writers. Michael Larmagew, remember Martin Larmagew?
Yeah.
That name? That's his brother, Michael. And he's a fantastic bass player, and he played with Paul Kelly and all sorts of people. And I met him. We went to see the Stems and the New Christ at Sydney Uni, and I was out the back hanging out, getting away from the crowd, and said to this fellow and his lady, "Can I stand here with you and want my beer?" Yeah, sure. It was Michael, and that's how I met him. We just started a conversation, and it's led to we're now in a band. And so we're playing around. So this is an eclectic. We're like a Paris Green, like Jeffrey started really the Paris Green idea. It's the same thing, but we're doing songs from Pink Floyd, Steely Dan, Kraftwerk, the Art Ensemble of Chicago. Name it. We're doing all these sort of eclectic mix of songs, which is a ball. We're having a lot of fun. I think that's it. Oh. Sorry, Expletive the Neighbours, I forgot this one. And this is the last thing I'm doing, and again, in the last couple of years it's been hotting up. So I got asked to join I got asked to join a tribute band, which to me was a bit odd because I don't like tribute bands. And they'd played around before, and it's a tribute to the late 70s punk, which we were discussing earlier. And we're doing 4 songs.
Jeff Holmes.
And Jeff Holmes. I haven't met Jeff yet, but I'm sure you know him. Yeah. And I love the X songs. I think they're great.
My favourite.
So I was a bit trepidatious, what's this going to be like and everything, but we got together and we had a few practices, and we're actually very good. The drummer's Murray Shepherd from Screaming Tribesmen.
He's a great drummer.
Oh yeah, and Bob Short on the top right was Bob's a real artist sort of guy, like from the 80s on. And did you come across Bob Short?
I know the name, but maybe a lot of people I know by their first name, being the music industry. So maybe I know him, maybe I don't.
So anyway, we're about to play some gigs, and maybe we'll come down and play in Melbourne too. But to my surprise, there's a lot of interest in this, which is interesting.
At the mosh pit.
At the mosh pit, yeah. And we're doing the Crowbar as well, which is the ex-tribute to Ian Cray.
Ian Cray.
Yeah. So I never thought I'd be doing that. That's only recent. So there is life after you, whatever. Penny, you should tell us what you've been up to, and have you got any more upcoming dates or tours or records?
At the moment, I'm not playing much, and that's intentional on my part, but I hope to start up again next year. And I'm working on lots of different projects in my head. I'm writing a book, so that's kind of something that is really important to me, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. But it's a long process. I'm not sure when it'll be finished. I like to think in a year or 2 it will be done. Also I've been playing music with lots of different people from different countries, and so there's some I wanted to do some more recording with some of those people. So I can't give you a definitive answer like saying I've got a new album coming out on such and such a date, but everything's in motion.
Excellent.
Well, that's great. We'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the end of the talk phase, and so thank you very much for listening to all of that. So next is we're going to play some songs of including more the artists that I work with, and Penny's going to get up and join me on one of those songs. So I'm looking forward to that. So let's have a drink and we'll get back into it.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you. I think I've got lipstick all over the... Yeah.
You're